Welcome to Noel's Good Friend Show. I'm your host, Noel. It's a show where I invite my friends to talk about friendship, how to meet new people, and how to be a good friend. Today's episode is called Friends and Family, and it's about the times where friends can take on the role of our family, whether we live far away from them or we're just not as close. Joining me today is a creative strategist, the host of the Right Hype podcast, and a very, very good friend. Please welcome Gavon. Hey, Gavon.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm super excited finally to be on your show.
So, of course. So I thought you would be the perfect guest of the season finale, mind you, because you were the person who kind of inspired me to make a show. I was a guest on Gavon's podcast, The Right Hype, and I've had a radio show back in college, and I produced like a show for the Smithsonian Institution, but I've never really done one for myself. And so I was a guest on your show, and I just kind of realized how doable it was, and also just how much fun I had being on your show.
Yeah, I feel like our episode was really impactful. There was so much that I got to learn about you and your practice. There are still just like certain nuggets that I take with me throughout my days, especially when I'm working on certain projects.
Actually, I was going to have a question. Yeah, that was part of my question. How did you feel when I was just like, I think I kind of want to do my own show too?
Honestly, like I was super, super excited because the reason why I started a podcast was to create a blueprint for creatives and professionals. It's all about building your own personal brand, understanding what it truly means to promote your brand and to grow your brand. And so from our conversation to hear that you were excited to start your own podcast, it just means that the platform is working. It's meant to instill confidence. It's meant to give people that push, especially if you're stuck in the creative rut. I want the Right Hype to be sort of like a well of information that you could just pick and choose an episode and all of a sudden feel like you're ready to get back into your creative bag.
Like I said, today's episode is called Friends and Family. How would you describe your relationship with your family growing up?
My childhood was really interesting. My mom and my dad were actually born in Jamaica and they got married in Jamaica. My mom, she was a daughter of a seamstress and a farmer. My dad was really different. He actually didn't have as many brothers or sisters. His life was a lot more rigid. He was in the army. So, my parents, they moved to the States to give me and my little brother a good life, right? Like they came to the States to provide us with opportunities. And my parents like to manicure me and make sure that like I was, a good representation. Yes, pride for success, a good representation. And so a lot of that came with, a lot of benefits, but also there was a lot of hard times in trying to live up to their standard.
Do you think society places a lot of emphasis on being close with your biological family?
Definitely when I was younger, I grew up watching, the Cosby Show and like Stuart Little and just these depictions of either big or small families that, had a mother and a father
And a mouse.
and a mouse.
Wait, that's a Stuart Little, right?
Yes. I don't know. Stuart Little has a very like, it has a very like thing in my heart, like a very special place.
The nuclear family, a mother, a son, 2.5 kids, and a mouse.
Literally. But like, there was always like, that was media that I consumed as a child. And so that inherently shaped my perception of what family life should be like. Even the idea of having, sitting down for dinner with your family. There were family constructs or traditions or tropes, whatever, that like I saw play out in media, in my friends' homes that just didn't play out in my home as it pertains to, saying like, I love you, oh my gosh, like, or if you get if you get all A's, like you get you get $100 for like getting good grades, or like, when you get a scrape on your knee, like your mom just like runs up to give you like comfort and like give you like, a band-aid and a lollipop. Like I always sort of envied this like tenderness. The tropes that I sort of grew up with internally at home never mirrored the sort of representations that I saw out in the world.
I agree. I'm going to be honest. I used to struggle with that because that did not reflect the reality of my of my experience growing up. The toughest thing is because without context and without anybody kind of explaining it to me, I used to internalize it. I used to feel like somehow, this kind of unique, or what felt like a unique relationship I had with my parents was not reflected in media, was a byproduct of something about me. You know what I mean?
Mm,
In the similar fashion, I've had to reckon with the reality of the kind of experience I had in relation to my family as I got older. That is actually more common than that Western depiction. That's actually something I want to kind of really emphasize. Like, I think a lot of people felt that kind of disconnect and kind of shame around maybe like a kind of familial relationship that was not the kind of like Western image. But by and large, it actually seemed like the majority more often than not.
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
Have you ever felt like you didn't fit in within your family dynamic? And how did you cope with that?
Immediately as I became conscious of my queerness, I knew I had a hard road ahead. I loved like The Little Mermaid growing up. I'm not gonna hold you. Ariel, like, was my girl. And as a child, I didn't understand it, but now as an adult, like, I can see there's like a similarity in her struggle with her dad and the struggle that I had with my dad.
Mm,
A struggle to love someone who I shouldn't be loving, and
mm,
being reinforced by my family that, loving another man is inappropriate, it's
mm,
ungodly, you're not gonna receive salvation and eternity in hell. Like, all of these things sort of reinforced, but I just remember loving The Little Mermaid and pretending that I had like no legs. I think psychologically, I was just trying to live this like fantasy like that I always
mm,
had. I always felt like there was a part of me that existed as one version with my family, and there was a part of me that existed when I would hang out with my friends, or if I was just outside of the house, blasting music in my car, listening to Britney Spears. Like, there was this duality that I had to adopt because I knew that I was different. I was aware of that difference, and I was trying to build an infrastructure to sustain the two worlds, and it just was so exhausting.
I think, to one end, it's for like queer reasons, but I think a lot of people do feel like they have to create like a self that they kind of manufacture to serve to their family, right? That works within the parameters of their expectations. I think, your relationship with um Ariel is funny enough, my relationship with Mulan. And this idea of like, when will my reflection show who I am inside? Like that, I connected with her so much. This idea of like, if I were to be true to who I am, that it would disappoint my family and I would not meet their expectations. And I really struggled with that. I did struggle to fit in with my family. I tried to cope by creating a false self, but I'm so gay. Like, I know I wasn't really like masking very well, but I think to me, the way I just dealt with it is I just did my own thing, just dodged all questions. At least my immediate family was kind enough to not like poke and prod at it because they already knew what was up. You mentioned a part where you felt like that self or that image of self that you had to create for your family started to cave in. And by my understanding, like you had to like start living as your more authentic self out of your own personal desire. Like how do you feel like that shifted the dynamic relationship between you and your family?
Well, it really started with communication. I was very distant, especially when I was, graduating high school, going into college. I remember my mom calling me and being like, "You don't call Emmy anymore." Me and my mom had a very close relationship growing up. I would tell her anything. But when it came to my dating life, I was very particular on the information that I fed to her.
Mm.
And she was very like particular on the types of girls that I hung around with.
Mm.
Mainly because I only hung out with girls at the time anyway.
Mm. Wait,
So I
would she
mean, it
say
was
that does like, oh, this that one, she's a little fast. And meanwhile, you're like, that's my sister.
literally, literally
Like, mama, you
like,
have nothing to worry about.
right, like, don't clock her tea on my behalf, please. Let her rock. Like,
Uh-huh.
she's safe. And it's just like, um, it's just interesting that, I went from communicating a lot to not communicating. And then I realized that, if I was going to improve our relationship, I had to communicate how I felt, because bottling it up was the reason why I was having these implosion moments. And so when I finally felt like it was time to talk about my sexuality. I remember I was dating this guy. He broke my heart that night. I don't remember what he
Mm,
did. I just remember coming home
mm.
crying. And I remember my mom came downstairs and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "Why?" And I was like, "It's because I'm gay."
That didn't mean so loud. It's just the way you said it.
I was like, I'm gay. And she was just like, "I know." And I was like, I was like, oh, in my own Shakespeare movie, right? Like, so Shakespearean, doff down. Like, I
Uh,
was just, I was just crying. And I just remember being such a weight of relief.
mm-hmm.
I'm just like, wow. Finally, like, got that off my chest. Like, I had to communicate what I needed to commute. What it really came down to is I stopped hiding behind silence and I
Mm-hmm.
stopped hiding behind tolerance and sort of like making myself palatable. And I started showing up as I was, as I
Mm-hmm.
am, and started embracing parts of me that, I had hidden for so long. And so, in order for me to potentially have saved the relationship between me and my parents, I had to give them little surprises as they came, as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to, you haven't known me for so many years, and I can't fully blame you because I've been holding back a lot. But now it's sort of like you get the blessing of experiencing all of me because no shade, like me and my friends, we have a key. Like we're laughing all the
Yeah.
time. We have such a good relationship that I feel bad if as my parents, you don't get to experience that. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
missing out because we're having a ball.
What's interesting about this conversation is in many ways I feel like our families should accept us for what we are and what we have to offer, because truly, like, we have something unique and special to bring in our authenticity, and they should like really leave, like, create space to hold that, you know what I mean? Because otherwise you're missing out, you yourself. You know what I mean? We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more Gavon on Noel's Good Friend Show. Welcome back. I'm here with my good friend Gavon here on Noel's Good Friend Show. We're talking about friends as family. In those periods where you were not as close to your family, was there a shift in like where you prioritized your time and keeping a sense of like community around you? And, who did you rely on?
In those moments, I really look to my friends. A saying that my parents would always say to me is like, you love your friends, that's gonna be your downfall. When I look back at it, like my parents were ops because they used to even tell me like you're so lazy, like all you do is care about your friends. And I just remember being like,
Mm-hmm.
now as an adult, I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, like if not for my friends, where would I be?
Mm-hmm.
Like if not for my circle, like
Mm-hmm.
where would I be when I am having a tough day and I need someone to remind me of my power? Or when I'm grinding on my podcast and I'm trying to push out content and, someone reshares something from me. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, my parents aren't supporting my podcast. They're not out here, making sure that I'm connecting with the right people in order to advance my career. So, in retrospect, I think my friends were always substituting my like family.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point I think even my family were jealous that like I had such a closeness with my friends.
First off, I think that's like really interesting that your parents were kind of like anti-friendship in a weird way, because I had always thought that like friends are the family that you get to choose, right? And so I think friends are a great opportunity to supplement the kind of care and compassion, the kind of needs that we want met that maybe our family isn't equipped to address. We are born into families, right? Despite the same upbringing, despite the same kind of biological makeup, we still grow up to be who we are. And who we are may not be, inherently compatible with our family members. But then to kind of force us then to get along despite all these differences, I think that's what we're, when I think about like a forced sense of sentimentality towards family, I don't think it's really fair, for us to expect our families to meet all our needs because, we just kind of came into each other's lives by luck and happenstance, life, birth, whatever. But no, I think we all have different kind of like journeys in life that equip us with the, certain tools to kind of show up for one another. And I think where it gets difficult is we want to receive that care from our family. They're not always equipped to provide us with that care. I feel like we internalize a lot of the ways that our complicated relationship with our families, even though like it's not anybody's fault, is I guess what I'm trying to say. I don't think it's anybody's fault necessarily when we aren't always that close with our family. And I think we owe ourselves grace in how we relate to our family, and also our family some grace if they don't necessarily know how to relate to us.
Yeah. I think too, like our families, specifically you and I, they come from a
Mm-hmm.
different culture. And in those cultures, there was different like rules that you have to play by. With your friend, like you can state the rules plainly. And there's a little bit of we both have to agree on these rules. With your family, it's a lot difficult, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you could have a boundary that you want to set, or you can say, I require this. I need more love or affection or affirmation or validation or whatever, and they can choose not to. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what's hard is when someone's so bound to their culture or so close-minded that they can't see you for what you need.
Mm-hmm.
I think our friends definitely can relate to the things that maybe we are looking for in a relationship, and we can give that to each other as opposed to our parents who probably can't relate.
How do you make peace with the idea that your relationships with family might always be a little complicated?
For a long time, I did not think people could change.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think that I had the ability to change to a degree. I have since then been going to therapy, got some really good friends who are really supportive, and I've learned that things can change. The world is like a system, and you can shock the system, and the system has to respond.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I constantly am trying to figure out with my parents is how can I let more of myself shine and see how they react to that. Because I think at a fundamental understanding, we are going to stand by each other no matter what. I think
Mm-hmm.
my parents have shown that they can be very judgmental, but they can also help me when I really need it.
Mm-hmm.
So come to the conclusion that they are a product of their past
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a product of them. I have to be able to see myself as, well, I was able to deviate from maybe some of their behaviors. If I can change, maybe they can change over time as well. And maybe I can rub off on them.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to like go through different phases of relationships with them. And I just always hope that the next turn that we make is a good turn. If not, we gonna crash, but that's cool. We gonna rebuild.
I've said this before, and I think it's a process by which I try to think of getting what I want out of life. And that something you want in your life is between two things. It's you moving towards something, and then the other is leveling your own expectations of what that thing is and how to get there. For me, I think for one, understanding that familial relationships are complicated, period. I've been loving saying, I think the term dysfunctional family, what does it really mean? Because I feel like I don't know if I've really met a functional family necessarily, A. And B, I think trying to meet my family where they're at, trying to stay in touch in many ways. I don't always know what to say when I call my parents, for example. I don't know what things to always necessarily share about. This show is actually the way I stay in touch with my family. So every time a new episode comes out, I share it with them, and they get a glimpse of what my life is, and who my friends are, and how that kind of comes along. In many ways, that's kind of how I related to my family historically. It's like when we lived in the same house, they were able to learn about me and absorb my personality passively. Because I'm me out loud, and so if you're around me, you get a sense of what's going on. I'll spill all my business to anybody. You know how I am. But it's hard to do that when we're kind of more distant. It's in those ways. It's like trying to meet them where I can meet them, and also leveling my own expectations of how a person ought to relate to their family. Do you think a chosen family, that of your friends, can provide the same sense of belonging as a biological family? Why or why not?
I think there's a lot of factors that play into what even the word family means. With family, there's lineage, there's heritage, there's so much sort of like context that came prior to your existence that is tied to family in the way that I think a chosen family sort of there's no precedent with chosen family. You create the community that you're a part of. Everyone, for the most part, has equal say in what the chosen family is going to operate in. Your family, your biological is your family. You don't get to choose them. That is
Mm.
so. I just feel like they're two different things. I think they serve a purpose and they serve different purposes, but depending on your life compass and sort of what you hold dear, you know, the purpose that you have with your friends might be the difference that you have with your family.
I think you're totally right in that you have to come to address like what does family mean? And I think I'm a big advocate for the chosen family for reasons of like I think it's wonderful that being a grown up and you know building a found family of chosen friends allows you to kind of like I said, like remedy some of those like unmet needs. What's complicated that for me too is like this idea of like, well, your family is always going to be there, no matter what. And it's like I don't think that's always true for everybody in ways that I feel like sometimes chosen family are. You know what I mean? I do think that family can provide the same kind of sense of belonging and togetherness as a biological family. It's just all about like that intention of building that and
Mhm.
finding other people who want to kind of build that kind of community. We're going to take one more break, but stick around because we'll be back with more Gavon on Noel's Good Friend Show. Welcome back. I'm here with my good friend Gavon. Today we're talking about friends as family. How do you build and maintain a chosen family that supports you?
I feel like as an adult, like maintaining relationships is a task in itself. It's all energy that
Mm,
you have within you. My chosen family are the first people that I text and I say, hey, just checking in on you. Let's like set up some time to talk or let's hang out. So I'm very intentional, when I spend one-on-one time with someone who I consider my chosen family. That's what I see as pouring into each other, whether we're watching TV or if I'm helping them with a project. And so, yeah, I feel like it's just about being intentional and finding
mm,
those moments, especially as an adult. I talk about this in my relationship, but like, how do you outlove the other person?
mm.
And I think that's how you like maintain chosen friendships. So he's trying to outlove the other person.
I totally agree with like the intentionality of it. I think to me is like I try to think about also like the tactile practices. Like for you, right? Like reaching out to a friend and making sure that you make time. For me, because I live alone, like it's not embedded in my experience all the time to relate to people. So I've met that reality with, just a set of practices. I call my friends all the time. I'm always on the phone with like Brandon and Maria. Like when I'm just like bored at home, like let me call my girls. And I think everybody ought to find their version of that. Like, what is your version of like constantly staying in touch with your friend just to tell them things? You know what I mean? And like just letting them be witness to your life. I think that's you know what? If I could like pull from my experience of like growing up and what made me feel connected to my family is their passive witnessing of my life. And I think how do we as adults within the time constraints that we have to work within, maintain that ability to be passive witnesses to each other's lives. That could be calls, FaceTimes, that could be Instagram reels, TikToks that you send to each other, but letting just people know what's going on. What kind of family, either biological, chosen, or both, do you hope to build for yourself in the future?
I am very much like a villager. I love the village
Mm-hmm.
mentality where what we all do is we buy a bunch of property and we live in walking distance from each other.
So building a commune.
Eh, Literally,
uh,
that's the goal is to,
mhm,
you know, foster a sense of closeness with my good Judies and
mhm,
buy a commune and just
mhm.
exist as as a tight knit community. I think that would be the dream.
For me, it's like in a very similar vein. I just want to kind of create like a community. I think part of the difficulty of this is like location, 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 right? Yeah, I think it's like just wanting to create like a family of both friends and biological family where like, if I ever decide to have kids, let's say, like then my kids would think of my friends as their uncles and aunts, like that kind of community that they can trust in the relationships that I have formed, around them. How would you like your family dynamic to evolve as you grow older?
One of my biggest wishes is that my parents meet my boyfriend one day,
Mm,
and that I can bring him to like Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner. That to me would just mean the world. I think it would
mm,
shift the way that I see myself, the way that I view my parents. And it's something small as like breaking bread
mhm,
that would really, to me, feel like as a family, we've really achieved something worth celebrating.
mm,
Not that the relationship that I have with them isn't worth celebrating now, but I do think it's like a video game and that there are some levels that we have to
mhm.
overcome and some bosses that we have to be. And
Yeah.
that to me is
Achievements to
like
unlock.
that to me is my the final boss. And
Mm.
I'm sure there's other things that will be hard in life that we'll go through, but yeah.
What advice do you have to anybody who's trying to navigate the world, having a complicated relationship with their family?
If you can afford a therapist, get a therapist
Hmm.
so you can really unpack your experiences with your family.
Mm,
I think there's a lot of times that we remember our childhood in certain ways. Some
mm,
people consciously suppress things, some people subconsciously suppress things. When you start to unpack what's suppressed, you can finally understand the impact that your parents had on you.
mm,
And to try and try again, they're not going to get it the first, second, or third time. Some
mm,
parents struggle, and sometimes they'll have really great days where things feel like it's trending up, and then they do something that you feel like you've taken 10 steps back. You know, as long as they're not harming you and you can take yourself out of harm's way, I would say like continue to try to relate. Again, the root
mm.
word of relationship is relate. Continue to
Yeah.
try to relate, put yourself in their shoes, and show them that you're putting yourself in their shoes so that they can also learn what it looks like to be empathetic. A lot of parents out here are operating with just like very few conflict resolution as well as emotional maturity. So it's going to take a little bit of that in order to overcome certain situations, but you have to model what change looks like before you see it in your own life.
As for me, I would say in that period, let's say, in periods where you're not as close with your family, I say lean on your friends, build these relationships, these platonic relationships, because I think it works twofold. To one end, it allows you to kind of cultivate relationships that allow you to have other people to lean on in ways that like your family may not show up. But I think the other aspect of that is like, for me, my friendships has been the playground by which you know, my friends have created the space for me to try out different ways of being, learn different ways of conflict resolution. It becomes like it was almost like a training ground for me to learn how to better relate to people. The conflict resolution, the things I learned about how to, show up for my friends are the things that I hope to apply to my family more and more, as time goes. But yeah, so I think that's a way of kind of like parallel pathing that what I mean, like that you're serving both your sense of belonging within like a chosen family, but also bringing in, if you choose to, bringing in some of those tools to relate to your biological family. But that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for being on the show, Gavon.
Thank you for having me. I hope that, we continue to push our podcast and talk about
Hmm.
all the things that we're passionate about because that too is an important relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you want to plug in your show, or like where can people find you if you want them to find you?
Yes, so please check out The Right Hype NYC. You can find us on Instagram as well as Substack. We just launched a newsletter.
Mm.
And yeah, I would say YouTube is at a great place. Just type in The Right Hype podcast and you can find me there.
And to you at home, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for being a good friend. I'm your host, Noel, and this is Noel's Good Friend Show. Till next time.